there's James, and you're watching another episode of Neutral Reviews, where we do real reviews for real decisions. And today, we are looking at the Ford Focus RS, and I have borrowed the keys for this vehicle from my friend Mel, who is an extremely knowledgeable salesperson at Delmar Motors in London, Ontario, who can either get you your next dream VW or even one of these if you're lucky. Now, I've been excited for a while to do this review, and that's because even if I had Justin Bieber money, I would still use this as one of my realistic dream cars. And that's because I love do-everything gadgets, and especially ones that have a drift mode. And the Ford Focus RS is one of my favorite do-everything gadgets of all time. Now, in North America, we always thought the Ford Focus was just a vehicle built to move people around as cheaply as possible. But in 2016, for the first time, we were introduced to a Focus that was designed to move people around as quickly as possible. Bred from the vehicle already made famous in Europe since 2002 for raising the hot hatch bar. Our first RS was a $30,000 powertrain and a $20,000 car. So we take a look at the facts, feels, and final thoughts of the Ford Focus RS to see if all these years later it was still money well spent. Let's take a look. And the Ford Focus RS, along with other specialty vehicles for Ford, like the Ford GT and Raptor, were flagship vehicles designed to drive traffic into the showroom. And they made this vehicle for 3 model years, 2016 through 2018. Really only came in one trim and not a lot of options. Really, you're looking at just upgraded tires and wheels, Recaro seats, and a sunroof, essentially. Now, when it came out, it started off around $45,000 Canadian plus fees and taxes, but by the end, it got all the way up to around $60,000 Canadian plus fees and taxes. But that price jump came with more than just fancy gloss black exterior features and those grippier Recaro seats for free. What it came with was a front limited slip differential to help put that power down. And that's because Ford Performance had a very narrow focus when it came to this vehicle. So let's talk competition. Now, that could be any other hot hatch under the sun or decently priced performance vehicle, including that exciting new Corolla GR. However, realistically, back at the time this was out, you're looking at the Golf R, Civic Type R, or STI. Now, that Golf R was probably just as capable on road and in all weather conditions and was by far the most practical, but obviously could not be pushed as hard on track. Now, that Civic Type R, contrary to that, was a track monster. However, being front-wheel drive, it was a little bit limited in the different surfaces and weather conditions that it could do. However, it was probably the most practical. Now, finally, when we look at that STI, it was by far the best off tarmac and in all weather conditions, but being an older sedan, it wasn't quite as practical. Now, this vehicle, when it came out, it had a lot of hype around it, including around those other vehicles, and that was because of the powertrain. So let's talk performance. And Ford uses their 2.3-liter turbocharged inline-4 out of the Mustang, heavily modified for this vehicle, of course, that can produce 350 horsepower and 350 pound-feet of torque, which is capable of rocketing this 3,400-pound all-wheel drive icon from 0 to 60 in around 4.5 seconds. And you're looking at a 52-liter gas tank with around 20 miles per gallon combined on a vehicle like this, which isn't great compared to some of that competition we're talking about. But again, with the level of performance that Ford is offering, it makes sense. Now, all that power has to keep running through a transmission, and I love it. They went with a manual only, a 6-speed manual that works well. But what made this vehicle so famous and why all the hype was around it, and justly so, was this all-wheel drive system that Ford Performance spent a lot of time and energy on. And that is because it is rear biased with torque vectoring. It can send 70% of its power to the rear and then 100% of that power to any one of those rear wheels to help propel it around a corner like a rear-wheel drive car. Hence the drift mode. Now, when we're talking about drifting around, they also gave you upgraded wheels and tires. Now, this has aftermarket, and any of the aftermarket on this vehicle will be listed in the description. It's mainly bolt-on and a tune. However, they did give you forged 19-inch beautiful black rims with very sticky Michelin tires, 2 sets of different Michelins that you could put on there as well, which was impressive. And you had to stop, and they gave you these beautiful blue brakes to match. But they're still good even though they're not red, because they are Brembos in all seriousness, and the vehicle has very good brakes and suspension. It does have an economy type setup, just like that Civic Type R, with strut in the front and multi-link in the rear. However, like that Civic Type R, Ford Performance knows how to tune it in line with this chassis. So let's talk chassis. This is the Ford Focus's third generation platform, and in this configuration you're looking at a 104.2 inch wheelbase, which is a little bit smaller than that Civic Type R, because we said it is very big and very practical for the segment, but this is still a Ford Focus and very decent. And being a Ford Focus here in Canada, it's still a 4-door setup and a 2+3. Now this one here has been heavily modified, so we have no back seats, but normally you do have back seats, and it still does have quite a bit of space in it. Now you're looking at normally as well around 74 decibels on the highway, which isn't too bad for an economy car like this and a performance one. However, this one here, I have no idea how loud it is, but it'd be way louder than that because it has different exhaust and intakes and things like that. But normally it's not too bad considering. Also, what is important for this vehicle, because it was designed to move people around as quickly as possible, as we said, is the fact that it can do nearly 1 G on the skid pad, which is amazing. Now, when we come back here, I see 2 giant real exhausts, and they sound like this. Now that sounded incredible. That's because it has modified exhaust, but even from the factory, the Ford Focus RS was known for having really fun sounding exhaust. But being a Focus, it was still about being a good second car and very practical. So let's talk cargo. And the RS, still being a Focus, had a decent amount of cargo space at 20 cubic feet when those seats were up, when it had seats. And those seats, when they were there, because they've been taken out because this car is modified, they were actually 60-40 split, which would go down relatively flat. And as you can see, you still have those straps like a normal Focus and hooks and things like that. So this made this a very practical second or fun vehicle. So let's see how those people in the back fared when we stuffed them back there. Let's take a look. And when we're talking about backseat comfort, it actually wasn't too bad when there was seats. Because as you remember, there is no seats in this one, so it's a bit of a low rider. But in all joking aside, this was still a Ford Focus. So many people bought this car because it was a fun car, but they also need a high level of practicality, which this car had in the back. It wasn't quite as roomy as that Civic Type R, which is a little extreme for the segment, but still probably a little roomier than that Golf R, and probably equally as roomy as the STI. So they really did try to do a good job, even with these chunky Recaros, to still put practical features like the pocket and to carve them out a little bit. And you had everything else, like your door pockets and everything else you would come to expect from a Ford Focus back here. But the most important wasn't back here, it was always up front. So let's go up front. And when we come up to the front of the Ford Focus RS, one of the first things that you realize when you sit in here are these Recaro seats. And that's because they're Recaro seats. So they're very aggressive and very snug. I'm only 5'7" and 150 pounds, and I'm in here nice and tight. So you wouldn't want to be a whole lot bigger than that, but the whole point of these seats is to hold you in, because this is a true performance car. Now, the only slight that I have against these seats is I wish that it went a little bit lower, like that Civic Type R, to give you more of a sports car type feel, but there's still lots of adjustability. These are power, and they feel pretty good as far as being comfortable. Now, when we come over to the steering wheel, you got your flat bottom RS racing type steering wheel with these nice perforated handles on here. It's a very nice steering wheel, and of course, being in this generation, you've got all the hard buttons on here to work your infotainment, which is sync based, which is pretty good for Ford. And on here, it actually has full navigation as well. And when we move down to the heating and ventilation, and again, on this generation here, you're going to have hard buttons, which most people like. And you've got your plug-ins down here. And being a Ford Focus, it still has tons and tons of practicality. So you still have all your door pockets, your cup holders, your nice glove compartment here. You've got storage over in here. It really has a lot of function and practicality, but that's not why you're buying this car. You're buying this car because of the way it feels and the way it drives. So now that we've gone through the facts, let's take a drive and see how it feels. All right, it's time to do our traffic light Grand Prix acceleration test like we got no back seats. Now, because this is a friend's car, we are not going to do a crazy launch or anything like that. I just have it in sport mode. We're not going to dump the clutch. It's more about just seeing how this thing accelerates off the line. Here we go. And as you can see, that was barely out of first gear, and that was pretty wild. And similarly, we want to do our emergency style type brake test, and we hope that all the stuff, because there's no seats to hold my stuff, doesn't fly up here. Okay, here we go. Same idea. Just in reverse. And hard on the brakes. Nice. These brakes are amazing. Okay, and here's where we do our everyday backup type test, just to make sure this thing's easy enough to park every day. So here we go. As you can see, it's not the best resolution on here, but it does work pretty good. And I do like the dynamic lines. And again, nowadays you can just video game it and it parks in there nice and easy. Okay, and here's where we do our quick turnaround test, just to see how much of a nightmare this thing is to do a any point turn, because one of the infamous things with the Ford Focus RS was its poor turning radius. But to be fair, now this is a bit of a wider road, but it's really not that bad actually, but you can definitely tell it does have a shorter turning radius. Okay, here's where we're going to do our handling test, but we're going to start it off with a full 0-60. Here we go. I think this is a little faster than that 4.5 seconds, but even when I did rent one years back, that 4.5 to 4.7 seconds factory does feel nearly this quick because of the all-wheel drive and the way it hooks up. This is obviously going to be a little bit better with the modifications that have been done to it, but again, most of them are bolt-on, so to be fair, it's just a little extra gusto compared to what you normally get from the factory, but it is very, very impressive. This is a true performance car. It is absolutely incredible. But as you can hear when you're cruising along here at normal speeds, it's very, very loud. And again, this has upgraded exhaust, which is going to make that worse, and the seats and things have been taken out, which is going to dampen a lot of that sound. But again, as I said, I've rented one years back when it first came out, because as I said, I really like this car, and it is extremely loud on the highway. And when you do have it in its firmest setting in track, and I haven't put it in track because I know that it's too firm for the normal roads, it is punishing, because this car really, really is meant first and foremost for performance. Where something like that Golf R, it's a nice blend of everything. It's going to be great on road and a lot of fun, but it's not going to be punishing like this. And that Civic Type R, same thing. It's kind of a happy medium. Yes, it's an excellent track car, and as fast as this on track. However, it is a lot more compliant and easy to use during the day. Absolutely. Now, when we talk about styling on these, it is a Ford Focus, absolutely. But this generation of Ford Focus, I actually didn't mind. But one of the things that I really, really love with what they did to this vehicle is this front end. To me, this is one of the best front ends of any vehicle for any price. And of course, you had the upgraded wheels and the big spoiler and things like that. But for the most part, what sets this apart is that beautiful front end. But here we go. So we're going to drop it down a second. As you can see, it holds the road really, really well. That almost 1G that you can put laterally, you can feel that here. There's very, very minimal body roll. And again, this is very stiff compared to most cars, even in the Sport here. But it's very good for keeping the car real nice and firm around the corners. That's my favorite radio station. We always talk about that we don't really get into the radio, and I'm not going to get into it here, especially with this, because this is my favorite station, absolutely. Another tight corner here. Holds really, really well. Really, really well. It's an absolute pleasure to drive when it comes to that on your back roads and things like that. You really do feel like you're in something special. It's not a true homologation car, but it definitely feels somewhere like that. Of course, if you look at Savage Geese and things like that, when you put this car up under or up on the hoist and you look underneath of it, you can tell that it is truly an economy car. There's not a ton of adjustment. You're going to have to do a lot of things with suspension and things like that. If you want to go hardcore on this, as far as camber and all that type of stuff, you're going to have to make some adjustments. It's not like a Mazda Miata or something where, you know, they bake in a lot of adjustment from the factory, because they know a lot of people will take this in racing and things like that. However, like I said, on road, you're not going to find anything like this. Yes, $60,000 Canadian was a lot of money, but I've driven $125,000 cars and $200,000 cars that don't handle quite as well as this or as much fun, which leads me to my final thoughts. Now, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on your notifications, and check out one of our other related enthusiast car reviews so we can get more cool cars like this one, or upcoming review on a 2023 Honda HR-V. Now, we started off this review by looking to see if all these years later it was still money well spent, whether you were buying it or whether it was Ford putting this $30,000 powertrain in a $20,000 car. And here's the facts and feels that we used to come up with this final thought, which is, this car truly is a performance car. They do incredible work, Ford Performance, on putting a true performance car, whether it's the engine, transmission, or that sophisticated all-wheel drive system, and giving you a true performance car at a decent value. Yes, it was expensive at $60,000, even $45,000 Canadian, but when you looked what this could compete against, it was incredible. So whether you were an autocrosser, whether you were doing full track days, or whether you're going to rally this car, you're not going to be disappointed. It is going to be an amazing performer in all those different surfaces and different conditions. But one of the things that makes this vehicle excellent as well is the fact that it is still a Ford Focus, meaning that you have a huge amount of practicality. Now, you do want to be a little careful because it still is a Ford Focus, and after all these years, this owner says that it is falling apart like you would expect a normal Ford Focus when it comes to things like weather stripping and, you know, roof liners and things like that. But as far as the performance and powertrain goes, this car is still running strong, and it is one of the best all-around, do-everything gadgets that you're going to be able to buy. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next time.